Good evening and welcome to this workshop of the Hopkins School Board. We have two agenda items this evening, and then this workshop will be followed by our regular meeting starting at 7 p.m. Our first agenda item is a literacy and letters overview. Dr. Mary Perry Reed and I talked about putting this on the agenda because literacy has been a big topic nationally and within our community, and we wanted to provide our community members with an update regarding what our literacy team has been working on here in Hopkins. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Mary Perry Reed.
Thank you, Chair Westmoreland, and good evening to our school board members, colleagues, and anyone listening in. Thanks very much for joining in this evening, and I'm pleased to see our guest presenters at the table here. So probably like many of you, I listened to the podcast Sold a Story, and you learn about, you hear about the research that confirms some of what you suspect, and I think what I learned is that teaching reading effectively to our kindergartners and upper elementary students does require a balanced approach, and that we really have to find ways to support our really talented teachers. Teachers come to us with lots of gifts and talents and lots of things they've learned in teacher preparation school, but that doesn't necessarily mean that teacher prep programs have also been great at helping teachers understand the science of reading and the brain science behind learning reading. So I'm just grateful to all of our literacy experts at the table, to our Director of Innovation, Design, and Learning, because in Hopkins we do want to do it well. We want to effectively teach and support all of our students, and we want to facilitate the kind of pedagogy that helps us notice and diagnose any learning struggle that is unhealthy, because obviously there are some types of learning struggle that are healthy and students really should be pushed and stretched, but when students are outside of that proximal zone of development, then we want to be able to have the skills to diagnose what's happening. So I do think that the letters training is helping to provide that, and I'm really grateful for you, Anne, to set up a framework, and for all of our experts. I think all of you are trainers, so that's amazing, and we're just looking forward to great results. And I think in addition to students feeling more efficacious in their learning, what I have learned from teachers is that they have enjoyed the rigor and the specificity and the relevance of the training. So we really want our teachers to feel that we are giving them the skill set to truly maximize their skill set in this profession. Anyway, I didn't plan on that long of a framing. I apologize. Goodness, I just sort of took off. So I'm really pleased to introduce our Director of Innovation, Design, and Learning, Ann Ertl. She might provide an additional framing. Then we also have Ann Baird and Elizabeth Nemec and Kathy Boughton and Melissa Gaussman. Okay, so thanks to all of you for being here. Ann?
Thank you very much, Dr. Mary Perry Reed. Good evening, board members. We are also very excited to be able to share this information with you tonight, especially given sort of some of the national attention on reading instruction. And we're very proud of the work we're doing on this in Hopkins. Go ahead, Elise. I think the way that we want to frame the update is really to ground us in the idea that literacy is a civil right, and as we aspire to be an anti-racist system, one of the ways that we can achieve that is by ensuring high levels of literacy for all of our students. And our mission around literacy instruction is really structured to provide that and ensure that we are meeting the needs of all students. And we'll talk more about that throughout the presentation.
Okay. Hopkins has had a structured literacy approach for about 5 years. That was with the adoption of the current reading program that we have. The structured literacy approach is the application of the knowledge from the science of reading. Some of our Hopkins staff started the journey of science of reading through letters in 2019. Several of us who started that journey are now our facilitators for letters within the district. About that same time, legislation required us to identify students who showed characteristics of dyslexia. That was to ensure that our literacy instruction was best practice for those students, but also know that structured literacy approach is best practice for all students. So throughout this presentation, we're going to talk about what is the science of reading and what letters work we have been doing here in Hopkins. All right, well, now I can't see that. Take my glasses off. All right, so on the screen, you'll see the pedagogical approach of structured literacy is the how teachers are instructing. So you see 3 big bullet points. It's explicit, systematic, and sequential. So you want to make sure that all of the lessons, whether it's phonics or comprehension, kind of all the way through, follows all of those 3. On the right side, you can see our current literacy curriculum. That is through the Center for Collaborative Classroom, which we also call CCC. And that is sprinkled out. We have Being a Reader, which is the phonics program through K2. There's a word study in addition in grade 2. And then Making Meaning and the Vocabulary, which again, still needs to be explicit, systematic, and sequential. And that is K6. And the Being a Writer is also K6. So we started with this journey, a curriculum that does have an outline for what is needed in best practice for reading.
And here we are now discussing the science of reading, which many of you have heard about. It's in the media. It's been national news and local news as well. This is really what the journey we began diving into when we began our letters training, really identifying what it means, the science of reading. And really, it's so much more than just phonics, and I think that's the part we also really want to stress in this work. While phonics, it's the building blocks, it's the foundation of reading. Without that, it's hard to be a proficient reader. It is so much more. A really powerful thing about the science of reading is that it's curriculum agnostic. So regardless of what curriculum we're using, it covers all of them. It's a tool that builds teacher self-efficacy, and it builds teacher capacity. So in the moment as a teacher, I see a student error and I know what to do, rather than being guided only by a curriculum which is scripted and tells me what to do. For the general student, it can be much more specific and tailored, which really leans into a work for personalized learning, because all of our students are individuals. They all have unique needs, and this allows us to address the needs regardless of what they might be in the moment, so we can correct the error and provide instruction so students begin practicing correctly and effectively. It's applicable to literacy learning in all languages, which we have seen as our Xingjing teachers have been a part of our letters training as well. It's dynamic. The research is ongoing, like any research, and so we continue to learn and read, share stories. Did you see this? There's a most recent article. Here's a research article. We're always talking so we can continue to advance our learning. It really has been informing our choice of instructional resources and materials, which is really important. I can say in my work at Tangland, we are looking at all of our materials with a very critical eye. Here is our curriculum, and it's pretty good. It has all the tools, as you mentioned, all the components and framework, and we're noticing we need to go deeper here, or this group of students needs this in addition, or this group of students needs a light touch, they really need to be accelerated there. But now we know what to look for and how to measure it, so we know and are certain that students have mastered the skill before we move ahead. And like I said, it's so much more than just phonics. It's phonological awareness, which is knowledge of sounds, the things you can do with your eyes closed when it comes to reading. it's spelling, it's also background knowledge, it's vocabulary, it's language structures, it's verbal reasoning, it's literacy knowledge, and writing. It's all of these components, which is really what builds a proficient reader. And in order to access the world, choices, opportunities, you need to be a reader. This slide is just a quick graphic talking about letters, which stands for the language essentials for teachers of reading and spelling, kind of a mouthful, so we say letters. And that's what we're using as an avenue to train our staff in the science of reading. So think of science of reading as an umbrella, and letters is one pathway to opening the doors and building the knowledge with the science of reading. And it really is cyclical. So we have this deep knowledge and capacity building in terms of expertise for us as teachers, which impacts how we deliver, how we select and deliver the core instruction. It also helps us to tailor that instruction to the individual needs of the students through gathering data, through assessments that are meaningful and really help us to look carefully at the smallest nuance of how a student is responding to instruction. And it also helps to inform our intervention. So if a student isn't making expected progress, we understand why. So instead of, oh, they're not making progress, we don't know what to do, or they're not making progress, we'll just keep going, it's they're not making progress, here's an assessment, now I know what to do, and these are the materials we are using to address those needs. So it really helps to personalize all of our work, but it's a constant cycle and journey. This one really is a highlight of kind of where we are right now with letters in the Hopkins schools. We have this theory of action. If teachers have strong self-efficacy, skills and resources in personalizing literacy instruction based on each student's needs, then literacy achievement for all students will increase. And this really comes to the heart of it, is that we want our students to be proficient readers. That gives them access to all the opportunities. When we consider Vision 2031, their road there is a road of literacy. So they're essential. It's an essential focus for our district. And Letters is really building this capacity for teachers to have that self-efficacy and confidence in the moment. Right now with Letters, we are working in Volume 1 this year. We have 50 classroom teachers and some special education teachers we are training. They are doing 90 hours of really intense online modules on their own time. So above and beyond their school day and FaceTime with kids and phone calls to parents and lesson preparation, they are spending their evenings doing online modules. And we all did them as well. We did them during the pandemic. And it's intense. And I have watched those videos more than once sometimes just to make sure I really understood the content. There are quizzes after every session. There are tests after every unit. In addition to that, they have 30 hours of debrief time face-to-face with us. So fortunately, those are built into our professional development days, which has been just worked beautifully this year in terms of honoring teachers' time. But in those hours, we are diving deep into the topics that might be a little bit more murky, where they might have more questions. The first unit is all brain science. So we have been talking about what actually happens in the brain when you're learning to read. What parts of your brain are activated? What happens in a dyslexic brain versus a typical reader's brain? And so this is what they're learning. And what they're teaching their students as well, this is what happens when you read. And to hear a student say, oh, you know what? I know that when I saw that letter, my occipital lobe was activated. This is the level of instruction. Or, oh, that's all vowels are voiced sounds, and they're putting their hands on their throats as they're producing sounds and able to tell us articulatory features. It's phenomenal. But this all comes from that 90 hours of really intense training and 30 hours of face-to-face debrief. In addition, with this work, I think we need to give a nod to MDE, who we've partnered with. They were the ones who trained us as both in the content and then later as facilitators, and a nod to Fonda, who helped bring Letters to the district. So I really feel like we're working in concert with many leaders. So we have the school board, we have our district leadership, we have special ed really supporting the work, and I have monthly meetings with MDE, keeping up to date on what's happening at the state level, what's coming down the road, how we can improve our practice. And it's a time where I'm meeting with other leaders from across the region to see what's happening in their districts as well. So the networking is real and it's happening ongoing, which really helps to deepen the level of our work as well. Oh, I do want to mention before we move on, we have the 6 trained letters facilitators. Last year we had 17 teachers and administration trained in Volume 1. This year they're being trained in Volume 2. And then as of this year, we'll have 72 K-3 SPED and EL teachers trained in Volume 1. And it makes a difference to have cohorts of teachers trained. One of the kindergarten teachers in my building said, what I really love about this is now I have a community, I have a group. So as I go forth and I'm trying to change my practice, I can lean into my colleagues and we can plan together. And that has made all the difference in the learning as well. And we'll continue the training with a new cohort next fall. This is a roadmap that I put together last year as we were just kind of figuring out what is our journey going to be as we continue to train our teachers. So the first year, Volume 1, it's a focus on, like I said, the science of reading, the brain research. It's a focus on phonological awareness and phonics, and then advanced phonics. And that is Volume 1, and that is the 90 hours of module time plus the 30 hours of debrief time. And then what we really recommend in the second year is a year of implementation and coaching. This is a really big year of learning on top of the job, which is extraordinarily large. And so next year, the focus will be on providing coaching for the 50 teachers who are being trained this year. And the coaching is the difference. The coaching is the support so we can take all that they have learned and put it into practice. And I say that not to block things out because this year teachers are learning and they're trying it the next day. But there is something to be said about ongoing coaching for the fidelity of the practice. So I can try something, but I don't want anything to be shelved. This work is what makes the difference for students. So next year there will be a huge focus on providing ongoing coaching for teachers. So this becomes their fabric. This is the thread of their work. It's not something that's pulled out now and then. This is how they breathe. And so that is next year. And we'll also, for the change to really happen, it needs to be widespread and be deep. It has to be both. Once they are trained in Volume 1 and have this year of implementation and practice and coaching and conversation, then we really encourage people to go to Volume 2, which the focus is more on reading comprehension and writing. Also critical because, again, we're kind of moving up those ladder of skills from the foundation into the deeper reading comprehension to help them be critical thinkers. Again, essential as we think about Vision 2031 and life. We need critical thinkers who can read a text, wonder, find another text, cross-check, ask good questions. This is what we're hoping for our students to be savvy humans in the world. And again, followed by coaching. The coaching is critical. To learn something is one thing. To be coached takes it to a whole new level. And then as we continue this journey, it's the constant practice and refining of our practice. It's the conversations, it's looking at student data, noticing disparities wherever they might be, noticing lack of growth and wondering why that is, and doing the work and changing practice in order to make sure that all of our students are proficient readers.
So I think most of our board knows that my background is as an EL teacher. And one of the things that has been, I don't know, I guess thrilling kind of makes me sound pretty dorky, but one of the things that has been so great about working with these ladies and learning about the science of reading is that it really is like translingual. When I was an EL teacher, you know, EL sort of lived in a silo as a set of practices with a group of students. Similarly, previous iterations of immersion learning have been the same. It is kind of a separate silo with a set of students who are having like an immersive language experience. But what I think our letters training and the science of reading in general has taught me has taught Rushi on my team, who's kind of our immersion point person, is that you learn to read once, regardless of the language you learn to read, and then everything after that, you are transferring those skills. And so it has been, this training and learning has been such a great cohering experience too. An example, at Eisenhower, we have English pathway, Juntos, and Xinqing teachers all engaged. Now, is it exactly the same for each of those? No, because the language structures are different. But we are able to do training for our immersion teachers with some modifications, and have been really successful in it.
Really interesting.
These are just some photographs from our latest professional development that we did with our group of cohort. And really, again, and as Ann had said, these teachers have spent 90 hours of their own time to gather this information, and it's pretty intense information. And then we have these 6 days of debriefs, plus there is 3 sessions outside of that they do at their own building that create that community, and talking about how we can support our students in those 3 sessions as well. But these teachers at our last one just said how they can't wait to come to these debriefs every time, because the knowledge they come out of it is so great that they feel like they can make an impact right away with their students. And so it's just been amazing to watch the growth of these teachers. These are just some quotes from our current cohort, and just some feelings that they have towards what they've experienced during our debrief sessions.
And just a little more data, thinking about the goal of teacher self-efficacy, because that is the driver in the classroom. There's a lot that happens every day in addition to the content that they're teaching, and having the confidence and the skills in the moment to know what to do, instead of I need to research this or refer to a text, but right now, without any of that, I already know what to do. That confidence shines through in a teacher. And so these are some resources, or some information we gathered from teachers in terms of how has it changed your instruction. And so phonemic knowledge, this is that letter-sound correspondence. I've been much more aware of where students are struggling with sounds and understanding the process of students learning to read and write. All of us obviously went to university. Many of us have master's degrees. I have a reading license on top of that. I coordinated a literacy program in a former life. I have lived literacy most of my life. And I will say that letters changed my professional life. Of all the things I have done, of all the hours I have spent in the classroom learning myself, this has been the change. And across the board, we have all had that exact same experience. So for us to have that, and then to see our teachers have that same experience, it's profound to see what happens in those classrooms with their students. In addition, there's just one other quote that I pulled out from some surveys we're doing at my site, but I love this because it summed it all up. The main thing that has sparked this whole change and growth is the letters training that I've been doing. Knowing how to do it better has been a driver, and having team members that are also doing it so we can work together at the same time has made the difference. So having a community as you take on really life-changing learning is really important, and I think we have this amazing opportunity because we have homegrown facilitators leading the work and coaching our teachers in our buildings.
I want to jump in here real quick. You mentioned Sold a Story, and there were teachers on there that talked about the 3Q system. That's what we're trying to get away from. And I was a product of that 3Q system. And when I went through my education undergrad, that's how we were taught. Our old curriculums, that's what was in there. And in my reading program, because I also have my reading license, that was still what was in there. It wasn't the science of reading. And so I started letters right after I got my reading license, and I was blown away because I'm a pretty good reader, and I can come up with most words, but there are words that I would stumble upon, and I had no idea, but I didn't know the sounds that went with it, and I would come to something and be like, oh my gosh, I have to read that out loud. You know, I'm not so sure I know what the word is. I've created one, but now knowing, I mean, we're teaching the rules, the reasons why the sounds make the sounds that they do, whether it's coming from a Latin root or it's French. And so students are learning that too, so they can attack words and feel more confident in their reading. And so I think the other thing with having our own teachers doing the facilitation is that we can work with teachers to help with that mindset. Because in that Sold a Story, some of them were saying the reason the science of reading hasn't really taken off much before now is because as educators, when we're taught as children and going through our programs, the way that the curriculum says we should do it, and now there's this whole new idea saying, nope, you really should do it this way, this is what the science is saying, and you're like, I can read, that's not, I don't need to do it differently. And now we've got people who can say, yeah, we do, we need to do it differently, even if we learned that way, a lot of kids are not.
I think just to piggyback on that, Kathy, when I went to get my license, we were trained in whole language. And the idea being, if it doesn't matter what level of reading a child is at, if you give them a book they're interested in, they will learn how to read it. And so some of this learning is like, I've heard other teachers talk about it, I've experienced to some extent, you feel really bad about some of your past practices, and kind of reflect on students that, you probably knew in the moment that you weren't serving as best you could. So I think there's definitely that emotional component to it as well.
I think
Kathy,
that-
can you explain what the 3Q system is?
So that would be, you're reading a sentence and I could take away a word and the kids are looking at the picture. So the picture might be a horse, but in the story it says pony. So as they're reading that sentence, the teacher covers it up and says, what do you see in the picture? Use your context clues. What does the first letter? But if the kid said horse, even though it says pony, you're supposed to be okay with that because they get the gist of it. So you're kind of using the other things, not the word itself.
It essentially raises guessers. So students who, I think of when they transition from books with pictures to chapter books and beyond, there are no more picture cues. And so oftentimes we saw students who did okay in second and third grade. The scores looked pretty good. And then they reached fourth grade and above, and suddenly fourth grade, the scores went the opposite direction. And it was this puzzle, why is this happening? They were doing so well. Well, really, they were really employing those guessing skills, because the reality is in the brain, you don't read a whole word, you read every letter in that word. So your brain is doing this amazing road race across the brain for every single letter in a word. And over time, that goes in your visual word bank, and so it looks like it's automatic because you've memorized that over time, but you had to map it in your brain first. And teaching kids how to map, and we're doing a lot of orthographic mapping with students, it's really powerful. I had a fourth grader argue with me one time that when I said bread, and now say bread but don't say r, and she said, well, yeah, that's bread. And I said, nope, let me say it again. I wanted her to remove the R, that R sound. And she said, why are you playing me? Why are you doing this to me? And I said, I'm going to show you the coolest thing when we're done. And I mapped it out for her. And she said, there is an R in bread. I said, there is an R in bread. And she said, I don't hear it at all. Because R is a liquid sound, which kind of, soaks into the surrounding sounds. When I explained why that was, she didn't feel, because she had a lot of self-doubt as a reader, because she couldn't understand why she couldn't do it, because she was really smart in math. Math was going great. And so why can't I do this because I'm smart? So am I not smart? And well, there's the whole conversation of smart, hardworking, and all of that. But on top of it, she didn't hear those liquid sounds of R and L, but having her break that down, she saw it, and then, eventually just took off once, but that was it. That was the moment. That's the skills she needed. She didn't need everything. She needed a few skills, but because I knew how to identify what they were, I could teach them, and off she went. And that is the beauty of the science of reading is, I have a very targeted assessment. I know exactly what you're missing. I'm going to teach you right there. I'm not going to back up to the beginning and waste your time. And I'm not going to go so far ahead that it's out of reach. It's right here, and I will teach you that. So it really is powerful in terms of expertise. On this one, just a couple more slides, kind of moving into that third, fourth grade, as we said, that reading comprehension, we want that to take off. But just some really powerful excerpts from our students, and we talked to them about reading. Kathy and I were talking earlier today. I was working with one student who's in second grade, and we were working through a lesson, and she said, "Am I at Groves right now? It feels like I'm at Groves Academy," because she did some tutoring there last summer, and she's like, "I feel like I'm at Groves." And I was like, okay, if we are like aligning with what Groves is doing, and nope, you're at school. But it was just an interesting parallel because of all of their work and how they are instructing students, that one of our students saw it the same. So I think that speaks to the work we're doing as well, even when our students are noticing it.
So this is a map of just looking at that assessment piece, but I currently am a first and second grade teacher at Glen Lake, and alongside doing the facilitating. And in my practice, Letters has really given me the why what am I doing for my students, and how can I support them best? And through Letters, they've given us 2 assessment pieces called the PAST and a Letters spelling screener that can help us really understand our students and where they're at. And so those really have guided part of my practice with my students in my classroom. Along with that, it's been so fun to watch the growth of all of my students. I just had conferences with them last week and telling the parents, look at this growth, and showing them what their children have learned over just in this year of their spelling skills and their phonics skills, and really their phonemic awareness skills. This has also really helped me identify how to personalize their learning and really meet them where they're at. So like as Ann Baird said, just really being that targeted instruction and not re-going over things that they don't need it, or pushing them further than they are. We want to meet them where they're at, and this has given me the tools as a teacher to be able to access that for them. So.
With that, we will pause and take any questions.
Well, thank you so much. This has been interesting on multiple levels, and now I know that it's my occipital lobe that is like either lighting up with excitement or struggling when I'm reading, depending on the text in front of me. So thank you. I'm wondering if my board colleagues have comments or questions for this really incredible group of educators.
Chair Westmoreland.
Yes, Director Adams.
We started this last year, is that correct, the Letters, or has it been?
Last year was the first cohort that we trained in
Okay.
district. So we were sponsored by Minnesota Department of Education.
Yeah.
But our first cohort that we trained, our homegrown, was last year. Yeah, so this is our
Okay.
second cohort this year.
So what's our relationship with MDE on this whole?
So
effort?
we do ongoing recertification and training, and so they cover the costs of that. And then I meet with them once a month to just really touch base and find out kind of what's going on around the area. Next year, when we go more into coaching, there will be more of a coaching protocol, and we'll be gathering some data there and some observation data as well. And so that is data that we will gather and then we can access through them. So it's kind of an ongoing partnership, so we can stay in touch with what's happening. I'm joining a committee, apparently as of today, as things you volunteer for in a meeting, but with new ELA standards coming out, and then the alignment of that with science of reading and assessments. But it gives an opportunity to see what's happening kind of cutting edge on the state level as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's,
What are other districts doing? How many have embraced this Letters?
It depends on where you go, and Anne can speak to this as well. In today's meeting, there are some sites in Minneapolis, which is where my child goes, so I'm highly attuned to that. Scred has a number, they've really developed their letters training in the St. Croix area. They have a group of schools that are called
Yeah.
Scred. And then we also have Princeton, Forest Lake. There are some surrounding districts that was who was in the meeting today. And then you had just said,
Yeah, I learned recently that I think one of the advantages that we've created in Hopkins is to have our own facilitators.
Yeah.
So we don't have to rely on MDE necessarily or paying an outside facilitator to come and train our teachers, which has been an investment, but I think it will pay off for us in the end. And I think, you know, given all of the sort of competing interests around what districts are doing, not all of our neighbors have been had a focus on letters or science of reading in the same way that we have. You know, one of the things that we've been talking about is if there are districts that were interested in partnering with us, what might that look like? Because it really is pivotal learning for kids.
Yeah. Well, considering how successful it appears to be, I'm just surprised that other districts haven't embraced it, and that the teacher prep programs aren't teaching it.
yes.
And they, when we first started, there were several colleges or programs that had people attending these trainings as well, trying to figure out how to bring
How
it
to
in
do it.
to
Really?
the teacher prep programs. So that was
Okay.
really interesting. But MDE is benefiting from us too, with us partnering. So I've been working with MDE on that coaching protocol and looking at the forums and stuff like that. So I know because we have so many people that now have been trained as facilitators, they look to us as well, kind of for our feedback. So it's kind of a two-way partnership. And I know I had another thought, now I can't remember.
And I think to keep in mind, letters is not Minnesota, it's not unique to Minnesota.
Right.
It's nationwide. So you can go across multiple states. Some states, North Carolina, all the teachers had to get trained. So it depends state by state where you look in terms of the degree in which they are embracing. And letters, again, is a pathway to science of reading, right? It's one road that gets you there. And so I think with the partnership that we have with MDE, it is that the two-way street. So we support each other in the work. And I think the other thing that's interesting is we were getting trained as facilitators. It's also outstate Minnesota, the rural areas, like West Central Minnesota, where I grew up, Painesville, St. Cloud, Sauk Center, all these other smaller sites too, up in Moorhead. It's across the state that people are being trained with us. All of us looking for how do we better teach our students. I mean, if you look at the scores across the state, they're not so pretty when you look
Right.
at student achievement. And I think for us, again, to have this homegrown cohort, it's really powerful to be a facilitator, and then the next day I'm coaching my teachers in my building. So that has been the most powerful path, because we will have this in-depth training, and the next day it's a shower of questions. Okay, I have these students, I have this group, what am I? And there's so much rich conversation and such fine nuance on it. And it's really informing every move we're making across the day in terms of literacy. And also really shifting writing. I've said for years that we have a lot of great readers who are very poor spellers. Their spelling, even in the upper grades, it is difficult to read. It is sound spelling, perhaps, a lot of invented spelling. But there is never a great speller who is a poor reader. And I love spelling, and I love words, and I always have, and so that's part of my own passion, I guess you could say. But really, in teaching kids to be better spellers, they are better readers. It is cyclical again. One reinforces the other.
Sure.
And in this work, we're teaching kids to be great spellers. They understand words. They can dissect them. They can put them together. They understand that it's both phonetic and it's morphological. So they're understanding words on a much deeper level. And I will say the teachers understand it very well, too. There's a teacher, a newer teacher newer, under 5 years, who said she learned whole language, and she said, I have to be honest, I'm such a better speller now. I am a better speller and reader now that I've learned this, and I'm learning with my students because I didn't get it. So the depth of that on so many levels is really powerful.
Well, it's a great story, and I hope that our assessments in the future show that we're making progress with these kids.
And I think what we can say is our formative assessments, MCAs, there's a lag, right?
Yeah.
So we are focusing a lot on K1, 2, and it takes some time to get that to 3, 4, 5. But in our formative assessments, in the past assessment, the spelling screener, which helps us to analyze by concept where the errors are and where we should guide our instruction, those we're seeing great growth in. And we've been focusing a lot on phonological awareness because that was one of the first units we really dove into. So we've been focusing on that in first and second grade, just that word segmenting in our scores. We were looking at letters trained versus not letters trained teachers, right? Like how do we, but we're seeing it, and that was 6 weeks past the point of us training. It was very short term, a very small amount of time to transfer into practice. But I think because of that work, it's beginning. And to see that in that window of time, I'm really excited to see what happens across time.
Right, good.
While we're
Thank
on
you.
the topic of assessments, so we've talked many times at this table about the limitation of standardized tests and how problematic they can be in many ways. Steve and I like to get on this topic. This is like one of our shared special interests. And so you mentioned during the presentation that meaningful assessment is really built into the LETRS model. You've given a couple examples through anecdotes. Wondering if you can talk a bit more about what that assessment looks like, because it sounds like it's pretty layered, which is exciting because it gets at all these different levels of what's
Yes.
going on.
So there are a couple. One is the PAST assessment, and it's a test of your phonological awareness. And there are different levels to it, and it's done one-on-one with students. And so it's, you would say spaceship, and they would say spaceship. Now say spaceship, but don't say space. And they just have to say ship. So there's some segmenting. It sounds really easy. I am sure you all knew the answer to that. But you would be amazed at how many kids say spaceship right back at you. Or they'll say the thing that flies through the sky. They think of it. So you go through this, through a number of them, and it's a compound word, that's where it begins. It's very difficult. And for those students, we go back, if they cannot master that one, we go back to, can they count words in a sentence? So if I say, I am at school, do they know it's 4 words? I am at school. Because some can't separate words in a sentence. So think of it as starting from really big groups of sounds, words in a sentence, compound words, onset rhyme like k and at, down to individual sounds, because that's how we learn. We learn from big chunks to individual sounds. So that's the PAST assessment. And then it goes to very complicated ones, where you're asking, if you say bread, they'd say bread. Now say bread, but don't say r, and they have to say bed. So you're eliminating, deleting a blend sound in there, which is really hard for a lot of students. But if they can do all of that really efficiently, sounds come first. English, it's a speech to print, and I often think that can be a difficult concept to understand, but kids need sounds and a lot of knowledge for the letters to stick to. So when they hear a sound, they can attach a letter, this crazy symbol of diagonal lines and curves, which they also have to, it's a random symbol, right? Somebody decided at some point in history to connect it to that sound, and they have to do that letter by letter. So that's the PAST assessment. And we are using Hegarty. We're using resources by David Kilpatrick, who's very well renowned in this work, to really build kids' sense of that, of those sounds. And I will say numerous teachers in my building have said, David Kilpatrick changed the life of the student. Now they're a reader. Because that was the work. Just that work with sounds, which sounds slight. It doesn't sound hefty or like it's enough, but having that deep knowledge of sounds and being able to manipulate them allowed them then to connect letters to the sounds. That's the whole phonemic awareness piece. The spelling screener, it's like a spelling test. You give it like a spelling test. mud, use mud in a sentence, they write mud, and it goes all the way down into prefixes and suffixes, and at the end, you can analyze it to see, do they know all their short vowels? Do they know silent E? Do they know vowel teams like OA and EW? Do they know how to add suffixes to words? So you can, it sorts out so nicely. I just did it the other day, and it's like, oh, you need vowel teams. You're strong, strong, strong. We need to work on this skill. And so by knowing that, if they can spell it really efficiently, they can always read it. So those are the two in particular that have really, again, they sound small, but they're so powerful. And they are built into the training. It's part of the training with letters. Oh, in addition to the 90 hours of online modules and the 30 hours of debriefs, they also have case studies. So they pick 3 students, and they have to do all these assessments and monitor progress with them. So it is a really deep dive that we're asking of our teachers. But that's what makes it so powerful.
And I think that gets at one of your questions to Director Adams. That may be a barrier in some spaces, like it's the amount of work that it actually takes.
Well, and are we paying teachers for all this time?
Yeah, so what we have been, as they mentioned, the debrief times are on PD days. And we have devised a way to do micro-credentialing for, I think it's 3 micro-credentials.
It depends on where you are in your contract journey.
Yeah, so we are trying to compensate in our teachers for doing this work as best we can.
So it's either micro-credentials if you're not yet MA 40, and then if you are above, then it's 1 micro-credential, and then you get $300 per unit. So it'd be 1 micro-credential and $900 for all of the work.
Okay, good.
So,
And that's for the first one volume?
Yeah.
And then that would happen again for the second volume?
All right.
it's a really good investment. It's a really good investment.
Other questions? Yes, Vice Chair Andreessen.
Yes, I have several. I wanted to say first that I am thrilled to hear that special education is involved in this. I think I've said in several different forums that breaking down those silos between the assets and the resources that we have in our district and bringing it out across the board. So thank you, Director Contreras, for bringing this to general ed. I would also, though, like to just get, I think, a better understanding of what were we doing in Hopkins before. Maybe an explanation as to why. And then what ages, grade levels does this letters program apply to? I feel like it's kind of, perhaps from my perspective, we're trading one curriculum for another, and at what point do we just kind of go back to this is how people learn how to read? And I think that we all had probably a very different experience when we learned how to read. So what do we do now? I think you touched on this a little bit, Director Ertl, for those students that we failed to teach to read. How are we bringing that instruction to them at the higher grade levels, say at junior high, those kids that we passed along and they find themselves in a classroom and they can't read?
I can answer, I'll start that answer, and then I think I'll turn it over to you to talk about kind of our literacy approach prior to letters. So we do have not as many as probably we would like, but we have engaged our junior high EL and literacy teachers in the training as well. Letters is the foundational parts of letters. They talk about like the first unit is geared toward the foundational skills of reading, and if we have junior high students who need that, then that level of letters would be appropriate for those students. And there are, like, the other units in letters move past that and into things like comprehension and things of that nature. But do you want to talk a little bit about what we were kind of doing before?
So we adopted the Center for Collaborative Classroom, CCC, as Kathy was mentioning, 5 years ago. And so that really is, that was aligned, it aligned very nicely with the science of reading. We didn't call it that then. We had done our research. We wanted to make sure that we had all the components in a literacy curriculum, and it does have all of them. So we had done our work to ensure that we were stepping up into what was a much better program for our students that we could build upon across the years. Prior to that, I've been in the district 20 years, and I taught first and second grade at Eisenhower. And I know that when I first started, at the time, there was just complete trust in what the curriculum said. And I think that's something, if you listen to Sold the Story, it was the curriculum companies produced this, and they really had people believing we've done all the work in the vetting. So as teachers, we truly believed that they had done all the work in the vetting, and we taught the best we could. And I will say, when I first started, it was very phonics-based, and I carried that through instruction because that's kind of what I knew. When the teacher prep programs are training you in a system that really is not aligned with how we learn to read, I would say in defense of the teachers, they did what they thought was best at the time because that's what they were trained to do. By the professionals in the university classrooms who said this is the best, and that's how curriculums were aligned. And then enter science of reading, which has been around for a while, but was kind of quieted for lots of reasons. Some political, some not. But the questions were raised, and we saw in our students that they weren't achieving the way they used to. And that really raised the level of concern if we have to change what we're doing. We have to. And I think years and years ago, the literacy rates, the test scores of students look different than they are now, and so I don't think it was of such a high concern. But we noticed that trend wasn't continuing up, that it was starting to either plateau or to level down, to trend down. And that is a lot of what drove our decision for the Center for Collaborative Classroom, because we were looking for something that was phonics-based. Science of reading, letters, is not a curriculum. It's just, it's the why. Why are we doing, why am I making this decision? And that informs the how of my instruction and what materials I am using. So think of the science of reading as an overlay to everything we're doing. It overlays any curriculum. So it's not gonna ever take the place of, it just deepens the tools that you have in the curriculum. And
So
we have,
letters isn't a curriculum?
It's like a college course. It's really what it should
Yeah.
be. We are learning about how people learn to read and the best ways to do it. And I think when we think about what we did before, it's not like it's 100% different. I mean, we read a story, we'd ask questions, but it's more fine-tuned. So the science of reading tells you more strategically how you are supposed to approach students in learning how to read. So yes, there was phonics before, but now it's saying, you can't just teach them the letter. This is really the order, and these are all the pieces that should be included in your instruction. One of the things we talk about with the science of reading is the reading rope. It talks about 2 different parts. So it's the word recognition and the language comprehension. And there are 8 different strands within those. And if you are weak in one of those strands, you will not be as skilled as a reader as you could be. So learning the why behind all those pieces, and even just the fact that those 8 strands are there, we can go in and say, like Anne was talking about phonological awareness, that's one of the parts in the word recognition. If they're weak in that skill, or that part, they are going to have a harder time learning how to read. So it's really understanding why kids are struggling and how we can fix it. So I think, it's going against whatever, or it's not using a curriculum, as Ann said specifically, but we can take whatever curriculum and now apply the pieces that need to be there that might not otherwise have been there before. And even though the one that we have is great, I mean, it's better than the ones we've had in the past, but there are places that are weak, so I work with a lot of small groups at Glen Lake, and there are kids who their phonological awareness is not great. And we are still at that segmenting a compound word, which is a pre-K type skill, and I'm working with a second grader. And so they are needing to separate those. but they have made huge gains, and you can see as they're applying it to their words, the skills that they've made or the gains that they've made. I do want to say I have another student who is now in 4th grade, and I've worked with her for several years, and she is one that definitely uses the pictures, but when I read with her now, this has been, year or two that we've been working on it, she doesn't just look at the word and want to skip over it to keep going because she's using her picture. You can see she is now using her skills. She can see the vowel blends, or the combinations, and she's working through the word and then is understanding the sentence. Even though it's still slow, she's using what she's learned because she knows each letter or combination has a sound and it's going to make a word rather than relying on just the picture for her to understand the story.
Part of your question was also wondering about this training for teachers who are teaching in the upper grades. Eventually, we want to offer this training for our teachers in grades 3 through 5, but right now we're focusing on K1 and 2. There's so much conversation that's happening in the building right now with our letters trained teachers that our intermediate grade teachers, our 3rd, 4th, 5th grade teachers are so excited about the training. They're asking for it. We have students who come new to the district who are not in our district in kindergarten who come without some of those skills. So we really need to get all of our teachers trained.
Yeah, and I would imagine there's our very own students, from what you've been saying, that are in 7th, 8th, 9th grade
Yeah.
that are going to need this.
Yep.
And I think that's one thing with letters that spoke to all of us, is that it's not just about kindergarten, and it's not just about 3rd grade. If you are a teacher of reading, to understand the why, you can intervene right where they are at. So last year, we trained mostly coaches last year in our letters training, and then some special ed teachers, and some at the junior high levels. And the junior high teachers, I was, are they going to feel this is for them? And they did, and they were wowed, and we didn't know.
Yeah.
We just didn't know. So we were starting way over here when we should have been way over here at the very beginning. But again, they then knew what is more of the scope and sequence of the learning and what to do and why it was important to do so. So some of the most fascinating conversations were with the junior high teachers who just didn't know what they didn't know. And I think that's what this brings to the table, and then the conversations start. Okay, what can we do instead? How do we transform this? How do we shift it? And the ultimate goal is that we're raising, in the younger grades, students with more skills so they are more proficient. So to your point, when they get there, they have the skills. In the meantime, which is our concern too, even if we look at our 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th graders, how do we build those skills? I think to date, a lot of us have been leaning into our intervention teams or interventionists to provide that small group instruction. We use SIPs, which is aligned with our curriculum. It's a part of the curriculum, to provide very targeted instruction to boost those skills, and then some class-wide interventions as well to make sure that they are successful. So that is, it is one of those, the more you know, sometimes it is this emotional piece of, oh, if only I could have done that differently, and what do we do now for those who didn't have this opportunity? I mean, that is a weight we are all grappling with right now, is how do we make sure they have the skills while teaching these kids point on right where they need to be, but yes, how do we address this? So that is definitely a conversation that is always happening. How do we make sure they have the skills, even if they're at the upper levels?
And so what is the curriculum that we're using?
It's the collaborative classroom. There's a slide in the deck, and we can share the slide deck if we haven't already, but it kind of outlines what the different components of that are.
And is there, I know back when my kids were in elementary, we were starting to use Common Core. Is that still the practice across the district?
The Common Core?
Yeah, Common Core.
Oh, well, the Minnesota English Language Arts standards are very similar to the Common Core standards, but they're not the same. So we are beholden to our state standards. which I don't know the percentage, but it's a small percentage different than the Common Core standards.
Thank you.
We have one more agenda item to get to. I'm just mindful of our time, but I also want to make sure that my board colleagues have had a chance to ask and say everything they wanted to say.
I do have one final thing, knowing that we're very short on time, and you had mentioned that you have kind of an eye on capacity and constraints. Is there anything that you've identified that either the board directly or in some other way is a barrier to getting as many teachers as possible? Like, do you anticipate being overwhelmed with demand for this?
I will say throughout the year, this year I took on the letters coordinator hat because it's how it kind of worked out. Teachers just emailing, say, can I get on the wait list for next year? And it's across grades. It's junior high teachers. It's special ed teachers. I know Fonda and I have spoken that it's a real priority to make sure our special ed teachers are trained, that this is essential information for them. I think for us, it's how do we balance our FTEs and our roles in our buildings, because we're all coaches or classroom teachers as well, with the need and balancing that with other initiatives in buildings. And so how do we do this work without overloading our teachers? Because that's always heavy on my mind, is how much can I ask of a human in a day? And so I think it's balancing all of our priorities, right? And deciding how to move through them to make sure that teachers have the cognitive, the mental space and energy for this learning, and that we have the trainer capacity as well to support them. So those are the conversations that we are having, and how do we best move this forward with the goal of training all of our teachers, because I think everybody also deserves the access. To be the best I can be, I need the best training I can get. And at the end of the day, it's what do our students need? What do our scholars need? That's what we're always asking ourselves to make sure that that we're serving them well.
Well, thank you so much. This is certainly multifaceted work, and we appreciate you spending so much time with us to help us and our community understand what's been happening and help us anticipate, so many great things ahead as more staff are trained. And I think too, just as our community becomes more aware of this issue and how we're handling it here in Hopkins, and certainly leading the way. Which I'm not surprised whenever I see Ann Erdl at the table. I know that we'll get some information that we're leading the way. So appreciate you all being with us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you
We should
all.
mention there's one more slide after the questions for you all if you wanted to learn some more.
Oh, great.
So there's the podcast, The Sold a Story. There's another podcast, Hard Words. There's an article about teaching reading is rocket science. There's a slide deck, a current film, The Right to Read, which is fantastic. It is free through the 9th, so if you want to watch it, I would do that within the next couple of days. Lexia has a blog post, which is fantastic, and then that last link is books that many of us have read and other articles if you want to learn more.
Thank you so much. Great.
Thank you.
We love resources. Resources, Steve, not homework. Oh, yes. So we all have the slide deck from the presentation. It's linked in the workshop agenda. And then Elise shared it with us too, so we can all pull it up in Google Docs. So we'll move on to our next agenda item, which is our superintendent goals update. We have about 10 minutes for this item because I want to give us a break before the meeting. So a bit of context for our community. Tonight, after our regular school board meeting, we will enter into executive session to do a performance review for our superintendent. This is in accordance with Minnesota's open meeting law. And what we like to do for the community and with the community to be as transparent as possible is share with you the goals that Dr. Mary Peary Reed has established for herself this year. And these goals are what we use to do the performance review when we're in closed session. And then at our next regular meeting, I will provide an update to the community regarding what we talked about during the performance review. So the purpose of this workshop agenda item is to remind us as board members what the goals are, and of course we'll go through those in more detail during the review, and also share that information with our community so that you understand how we are evaluating and measuring progress. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Mary Peary-Reed.
Thank you, Chair Westmoreland, and thank you, board members and community members, for this opportunity to bring everybody up to speed on what our 3 system-wide goals are and sort of how we got here. And then, as our chair mentioned during the closed session, then we'll go into more detail around the superintendent goals. So this focus is on the system goals. And for some reason, I tried. I think we lost the connection. Oh, okay. Thanks, Elise. Okay, so one of the starting points in the virtual State of the District sessions that we've been facilitating with our community is this one with Vision 2031, and helping our community remember if they were around, or helping them understand how we coalesced Vision 2031. And so for all of you, if you remember, back in the summer of 2018, we partnered with about 27 Royal Reps, junior high and high school age students, who designed a summer-long community engagement effort and interviewed about 300 families around what does a world-class education look like. We also asked similar questions of all of our staff here in Hopkins through a survey that received a high number of responses, and then we partnered with Go-Kart Labs, a firm that helped us put together all of these discrete pieces of input and feedback into Vision 2031. We introduced that to staff in the fall, and then also launched 9 strategic task forces, and that was a really successful effort. We held about 9 weekly meetings, where over 250 staff, parents, and students came together and each team focused on one aspect of the vision, and then answered the question, what will success look like in this space with communications and marketing, with early learning, with transforming teaching and learning? What will this look like in more concrete terms, or what should this look like in more concrete terms by the time we reach Vision 2031? So at a high level, our vision includes those success indicators. It includes our 6 core values, our innovation and school transformation drivers, and also our Hopkins graduate profile. So that's our vision at a very high level. And then here's just a closer look at our success indicators. So when we say success indicators, what we mean is what will be the indications of success, quite literally. Like, how will we recognize success when we arrive? And so our vision articulates that we want to be a #1 choice for families as well as for potential employees, that we want to be seen as a beacon of innovation across the state of Minnesota. And I can tell you that we are seen as a beacon of innovation in the state of Minnesota. So now I think we need to go national with that success indicator. We want our students to be known for their skill sets and dispositions because of the learning we facilitated for them in Hopkins. We also want each of our graduates to be matched with a 2 or 4-year college or gap year or career placement of their choice. We want to eradicate racial and income, socioeconomic predictability from not only our results, our achievement results, but also our programs and practices. And we want our staff and student demographics to match. So those are our bold success indicators. And they're so audacious, like we know it's going to take a long time to achieve some of these things. But also I think they're very clear, like they're very clear descriptors of what radical change would look like. So on this slide, and I think while I'm talking, I'm going to share this with each of you so you can take a closer look. This slide is just a screenshot of a prioritization matrix that we had all leaders respond to, not this past spring, but I think the spring of 2021. So we looked at all of these great things that we were really hoping to achieve and work toward in Hopkins, and we asked our leaders to prioritize which of these, we know that all of these are very important, but which are most urgent and which are the strongest levers. And so that's how we arrived at the instructional and operational priorities that you'll see on this next slide. So you'll see that these priorities then, our instructional and operational priorities, are reflected in many areas of our current strategic plan and roadmap. So they are all classrooms moving toward personalized learning that is concept and inquiry based. Also incorporating restorative and wellness practices in all of our learning and communal spaces. And building capacity within our adults for a shift in mindsets and also skill sets around change. So we've been trying to hold ourselves accountable for facilitating change management training for our leaders and for our HILT teams that then bring it back to staff. And then our operational priorities include one around culture, with all voices being at discussion and decision tables. And this is the one manifestation of greater distribution of power. Also building a strong data infrastructure and system, and increasing our focus on holistic school safety, the infrastructure for that, as well as site-based and district-based teams. Okay, so this slide shows then our 3 main goals, each within a single goal area. So the 3 goal areas are learning and teaching, school and district culture, and operations. Sorry, it took me forever to share those slides with you. You should have them in your inbox. And then we have an equity commitment within the learning and teaching goal. We have an empathy commitment within the culture goal, and an innovation commitment within the operations goal. So our learning and teaching goal, very briefly, is that we will have every early learning through grade 12, including transition plus classrooms. All classrooms will move toward concept and inquiry-based learning, personalized learning. And this learning will be undergirded by restorative and wellness practices. Our culture goal is around increasing wellness. So we imagine our organization as a place where people show up for work and they experience their workplace as safe and caring. They experience leaders as being trusting of the staff that they serve, sharing power, diffusing traditional hierarchy and operating in ways where everyone can show up and be seen as having equal worth. And we really have a long way to go in that space. I think that we do have some structures that we're building that help us move toward that goal. But in school districts, really across our country and maybe the world, there does tend to be a division between schools and district office, or between licensed staff and non-licensed staff, right? And we believe that every individual is talented, smart, and capable, and that when decisions are made, the folks who are responsible for carrying out the decision need to be represented at the table. And that's hard to do because of how we're all, how our workday is structured with time and with our responsibilities, right? So for example, it's difficult for teachers to meet on teams and committees during the workday, but it's an aspiration that we have, and we have to figure out how to mechanize that. And then finally, for our operations goal, very simply, that we will identify inefficiencies in our system to help us and also help all adults in the system do their jobs more effectively or efficiently. And then I'll just give you a minute to read the equity, empathy, and innovation commitments. So one thing that we have heard from, especially from our school leaders, is that this collection of goals feels more manageable, right? If you remember, we used to have 6 goals, 6 goal areas and 6 distinct goals. Now we have condensed and streamlined our focus areas into 3. And so that feels really manageable. And then we've found a way to align the what with the how. So the equity, empathy, and innovation, those are like the how mechanisms, and the learning and teaching, culture, and operations, those are the what's that we are moving toward. So folks have said that it feels more coherent and more aligned and more manageable. So this slide is a snapshot, and we also introduced this slide in our State of the District virtual presentation. So it's just a snapshot of a screenshot, of what our actual strategic plan and roadmap looks like. So if you actually had a link to the plan and roadmap, then it would extend vertically farther down, but the structure would be the same. So there's a spreadsheet for each of the 3 goal areas. There are deliverables within each goal area. There are 93 deliverables in total, which is sounds quite aggressive, doesn't it?
A few, yeah.
That's a few. However, if you notice, they're each time-bound to one of 4 phases of implementation. So we're not working at the same intensity levels at the same time for each goal area. But, and I think there's another slide that explains this. So can you just go back for 1 second, Elise? Thank you. So each deliverable, which those are described in the horizontal rows there, each deliverable has a project plan, a project sponsor, and a project manager. The project plan describes the work that will be done to accomplish that deliverable, and then the project manager works with the project sponsor to execute against that plan. So this is really the face of a pretty complex and detailed infrastructure so that we can keep ourselves organized for getting this work done. between now and 2031. And then on this next slide, you'll see examples of deliverables within the 3 goal areas. So in our State of the District presentations, we've invited community members to either follow the link and look at the strategic plan and roadmap with a more detailed eye, or just to stay at a higher level and have a glimpse of some of the examples of efforts that we want to progress toward within each goal area. Right, so for example, that first deliverable, all K2 teachers trained in science of reading. So we are making significant progress with the help of Anne and her team and all of our literacy experts. We are making significant progress against that deliverable. And then this next slide. So this is a screenshot of a project plan. So they're pretty detailed, where the project manager and sponsor work together to articulate what is within the scope of the work for this year, what is outside of the scope, so that we're not, stretching ourselves too thin, because I think the reality is that all of this feels like a lot to many of our leaders and other folks working to accomplish these deliverables. So our partner in this, Meredith Fox, has really urged us to be specific about what we're going to focus on this year, and then if there are things that need to be done but not until starting next year, then let's be clear of what's in scope and what's out of scope, and then resources needed, which members of our Hopkins community are sitting on the team and helping execute with the work, and lots of other details. So these are the plans that we check ourselves against when we meet on Wednesdays to engage in our progress monitoring. So I know we're at time, and as Chair Westmoreland mentioned, the goal really of this session was to give you and our community a sense of what our 3 goals are and the system of accountability and support that we're currently engaged in, so that we can move forward thoughtfully and with specificity, and really have people experience a balance of accountability and support. And then in the closed session, we'll look more closely at my personal goals.
Thank you, Dr. Mary Perry Reed. And with that, we will end our workshop, and let's take a 5-minute break. So please be back at 7:03. Thank you. Good evening. This meeting of the Hopkins School Board is called to order at 7:04 p.m. I'm Chair Jen Westmoreland, and as has been our practice recently, we are going to go around the table and introduce ourselves. So we will start with our, I was going to say our new clerk, but he has been in the role now for 2 months and is just doing a remarkable job. So we'll start with Clerk Ross.
Good evening, Hopkins community members and community at large. My name is Jason Ross. I have 3 children who attend Tanglin Elementary. I have 2 4th graders, 1 1st grader. I have been in the community now for the past, it's going to be 10 years on April 7th if you are counting. So I've officially would be here 10 years in about a month. And my wife and I moved from St. Paul and moved to Hopkins, and we liked what Hopkins represented from a socioeconomic diversity and just from a diversity in different walks of life. And we've enjoyed the welcoming community and active participants in different types of opportunities, such as, having the children play in rec sports where they're able to play with their friends and meet different community members. So thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tanya Khan. I have been living in Hopkins for about 12 years. My kids both graduated from Hopkins High School and Hopkins Schools. They're currently attending the University of Minnesota. The reason why we really appreciated Hopkins was because of its high academic standards and its wonderfully diverse student population. My children were always welcomed, and we have a phenomenal staff and student body at Hopkins. That's me.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shannon Andreessen, and I have been living in the district for 15 years. I have 2 children who went through the district, a 9th grader at West Junior High and a junior at the University of Minnesota, who was well prepared by Hopkins to be incredibly successful there.
Chair Jen Westmoreland, she, her pronouns. I have a 6th grader at Eisenhower Jing. I am a proud graduate of Hopkins Schools, have spent most of my life in this community, and this is my 2nd term on the Hopkins School Board.
Steve Adams, treasurer. I don't want to tell you how many years I've lived in the district, but it was before open enrollment. So we moved here so our kids could be in the Hopkins School District. And they're both grown adults and very successful in their careers, having spent all of their formative years in Hopkins schools in classrooms.
Hi, I'm Katie O'Shea Peterson. I am finished up my 3rd year, entering my 4th year on the school board, and I have a 5th and a 6th grader at Meadowbrook.
And I am Rachel Hartland. Like many of my colleagues, I moved here for Hopkins Schools and have lived in this community for 6.5 years now or so. And my 2 elementary schoolers go to Meadowbrook, and my junior high student goes to North Junior High, and we have also participated in early childhood, community education, and extracurricular activities all over the district. And I have been on a brief break from the board table for a variety of reasons, but I'm very happy to be back here in community with you and to welcome anyone who's in the room and watching remotely.
Thank you. And our superintendent, Dr. Mary Perry Reed.
Good evening. I'm Rhoda Mary Perry Reed, superintendent. I have a 5th grader at Eisenhower. She'll be at West next year. I have a 9th grader at North who will be at the high school next year. And I have a stepson who's a kindergarten para at Eisenhower Elementary.
Thank you. So we appreciate our community joining us via the YouTube live stream, and we have some community members here with us tonight. Our next agenda item is open agenda. This is typically the time when the board hears public comment. There are 2 options for giving public comment at a school board meeting. You can record a message before the meeting begins, and we would play that message publicly. There are instructions for how to do that in the board packet. We did not receive any voice messages this evening before the meeting began. And the other option, of course, is to visit us here in person and to fill out a public comment card before the meeting begins, hand it to me, and I will call you up to the table to give your comment, and I did not receive any public comment cards this evening. So we will move on to our next agenda item, which is reports. And this is normally when we do our student board representatives reports. We do not have any student board representatives with us at the table this evening. I don't see any on the Google Meet, but I just want to double check. Okay, so next we'll move on to our superintendent's report with Dr. Mary Peary-Reed.
Thank you. Kind of sad that we don't have any student reports. They're always very interesting.
Yes.
Okay. Elise, do you mind? Thank you. All right. Well, I'm happy to be with all of you this evening. I have a few slides that will help showcase all of the great things happening, well, some of the many great things happening in our district. So one of the favorite parts of my job is being invited to be a guest reader in our elementary schools. And so I was in Miss Allison Wolf's class, who is also one of our 3 Hopkins Teacher of the Year semifinalists, by the way. So that's really exciting news that we have 3 Hopkins teachers on that short list of esteemed teaching professionals here in the state of Minnesota. Miss Wolf teaches 1st grade Spanish immersion at Eisenhower, and if you get invited to do anything in her class, you better be well prepared and organized. She runs a very tight but loving ship. That classroom is like a family machine. It's really magical to watch. But Miss Wolf invited guests to read biographies of famous people with Latin American heritage. And so I asked our library media specialist, Jeff Shepard, to help me select a biography. And so we chose a biography on Celia Cruz, who was a Cuban singer who left her homeland and later became known around the world as the Queen of Salsa. And what I kind of like about this picture is her hair kind of matches mine in the picture, which it's not really a district highlight. It's just more of like a fun feature.
I think you need the dress too for the next
I was thinking about that, and look at her royal blue dress is exactly our branded color. Maybe Jolene will like that. She does. Okay. So I just really enjoy reading for our elementary students, and it's really nice to see them well educated and well cared for in our classrooms. This next slide, I was fortunate to have a brief visit with our state legislator, Kelly Morrison, at Meadowbrook Elementary. And on that slide, you'll see the names of other legislators who serve the Hopkins residential or attendance areas. And this week is a big week at the Capitol. I mean, there's every week at the Capitol, I think, is a big week. But for school and district leaders, this is a big week because many of us will descend on the Capitol at some point this week and engage with our legislators to advocate for increased funding and for other measures that will help us serve our students and families and staff at higher levels. I know that members of our Hopkins Legislative Action Coalition will also visit the Capitol this week. So it's nice to have FaceTime with our legislators. One fun fact about this visit is that we observed a cluster of students around Principal Sawatsky, and they were all guessing her age. And she didn't tell them, so that was great. And she had a few specific questions about the proposed policy to forbid suspensions at the kindergarten through grade, I think, 2 or 3 level. And so it was wonderful to have the student support and restorative culture specialists be able to spend a few minutes with our legislator. So thank you for that visit, Senator Morrison. Okay, so I wanted to share with our community that it was really, really fun to host 7 virtual State of the District sessions with our community. I was going to ask a woman on Jolene's team, Megan Chillman, who helped moderate, how many total people signed up. We didn't have as many attendees as we had signups, but I think we had more than 200 attendees. I was thinking closer to 250, but we'll get that number accurate and share it with our community. We are planning on recording a State of the District session and then sending it out to all of our staff and families so that if they didn't get to attend, they can just watch a recording. And we are also following these virtual sessions with in-person engagement opportunities, with our first one happening on Monday evening at Tanglin, working with the Tanglin parent-teacher organization. So I think it will be, in this sort of quote-unquote post-COVID space, I think it will be really wonderful to engage with our community, to talk with parents and staff and students, and to make sure that what parents want and expect and need and what our students and staff want, expect, and need are aligned with what they're experiencing. So we're being very intentional with these visits, and we're hoping that folks get as much out of them as we do. One of the in-person engagement sessions that we have already hosted is a session that we had at Harley Hopkins. So this was just this past week, and it was really nice to have lots of parents stop through, but also staff. Now, we didn't have a lot of 3- and 4-year-olds stop through, though. But it was nice to engage with parents, with grandparents and aunts and uncles of our littles, and also to visit some of the classrooms. And so I want to thank Sarah Chauvin for helping to coordinate that, and I know she had a lot of help from her team, which includes Angela Sandock, Kathy Willett, and Jennifer Mullen. And also our school board vice chair, Shannon Andreessen, was there as well, so thanks for being there. So this is a highlight for our junior high scholars. Our very own Great Gatsbys competed at the Lego League High Tech Kids State Championship Tournament, and get this, they won first place out of 445 teams for their innovation project. So that's a big deal. And pictured on the right is the press release regarding their first place award. So we're really proud of Lucian, Gavin, and Fiona, and they are currently filing for their second provisional patent for this year's invention. So this is a small but mighty group of scholars, and we can't wait to see what else they can do in the area of robotics. I'd love to recognize the amazing effort of our Hopkins Education Foundation in hosting the Royal Bash a couple of Saturdays ago. Our parents and community donors contributed more than $250,000 to support Hopkins schools. So we're truly grateful for that, that support. And these resources will be aligned with our elementary literacy, our academic support center at the high school, and the launch of our certified nursing assistant program at the high school. And so I know that our community is very excited about all three of these programs. One of the features of the BASH that I really enjoyed was the small jazz ensemble guided by our band instructor, Nora Tycast. It was really nice to sit with a couple of parents and listen to their performance. Another Hopkins High School highlight is the recent Royally Speaking performance, which was a collection of soloists and dance artists and poets. All of these performances done by a few of our Black students and staff at Hopkins High School. The Minneapolis choir, known as KNOWN, KNOWN, that's the name of their group, also performed, and they were really fabulous. It wasn't a standing room only audience. We had many more attendees, I think, last year. So hopefully, what I was hoping is that it was recorded, because the whole show was truly, truly moving and phenomenal with a lot of amazing student talent. And so the good thing about a smaller audience is there was enough food for everyone to have seconds and thirds. And then one final, well, couple more high school features, actually. Orchestra instructor Allison Swigum hosted a spotlight concert a couple of weeks ago, held at our high school. And this spotlight concert featured our orchestra students as well as a local musician, an indie pop singer-songwriter by the name of Jeremy Messersmith, who the audience really fell in love with. It was a special treat to have him in Hopkins because he's apparently well known throughout the state of Minnesota and has been featured in the New York Times. So that was a wonderful concert to attend. And then a final high school focused feature is I wanted to introduce our Term 2 scholars who were recognized by their teachers. And so there is a video that showcases these scholars as introduced by teachers who talk about all of their strengths. And some of the words that were used to describe these students include accomplished, kind, focused, determined, thoughtful, and hardworking. So congratulations to our high school Term 2 scholars. Today, I had a wonderful opportunity to shadow Lou, our virtual EDU school leader. And Lou had a very busy day. She recently observed a model MTSS meeting facilitated by Dr. Camphy and her staff at West. And then one of her meetings today involved dissecting her notes and identifying MTSS, which stands for Multi-Tiered System of Supports, identifying MTSS next steps for virtual EDU students and families. She also met with a number of staff about specific family needs. She had a meeting with Brett Stringer, who's a data specialist that is split between Gatewood and virtual EDU, to talk about data support for virtual EDU. She conducted a mini learning walk in the 4th through 6th grade virtual classroom, and that's pictured on the left. And then she and Tiffany hosted an all virtual EDU staff meeting, and you'll see a picture of those folks on the right. And I just want to compliment our virtual EDU staff and leaders for delivering a model of instruction that really does meet the needs of one of our target population. So we have a subset of families who work and learn well from home. They need flexibility. they thrive in a virtual environment, and there are other considerations that help them choose virtual EDU. I want to thank our communications and marketing team and under the leadership of Jolene Goldati for helping us figure out how to market this really important school and way of learning to our broader Minnesota community. So there's a lot of work that we're doing to scale virtual EDU and to ensure that the programming and the learning experience is offered within that virtual setting. And as we're evolving into a blended learning model, we know that this needs to continue to be part of our portfolio of schooling in Hopkins as we move into the future of school. So thanks very much to our school leaders, Tiffany and Lou, and really to all of the different leaders and staff who are supporting virtual EDU. And then this is the final slide, and I would like to close by honoring Ashley Beard, who is a Hopkins High School student and really beautiful human who recently passed away after suffering from Huntington's disease. Ashley is remembered, and she was remembered and celebrated yesterday at New Hope Church. We had a whole busload of students, probably nearly 50 students, both students with IEPs and also regular education students who were serving as student helpers, and a number of staff and administrators who spent time with Ashley's family yesterday at the memorial services. Her family organized a ton of photos. There was a table of Ashley's toys, and Mom Wendy invited people to take a toy with them when they departed. And all in all, she was remembered as a young woman who was full of life, had a really vibrant and fun personality, and was a friend and sister and daughter to many. So it was a really nice service, and I just want to thank Lori and Judy, her teachers. Actually, Ashley had a lot of teachers and paraprofessionals who worked closely with her. I know that Fonda and Brian also supported that team. And if you see the stuffed bears that Lori and Judy have, those bears were made out of Ashley's favorite shirts. So it's a really nice way to remember her, and I will close with that.
Thank you very much. Any board member comments or questions for Dr. Mary Perry Reed? Well, with that, I would look for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next, I would look for a motion to approve the consent calendar.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second?
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar.
Chair Bouchard,
Yes.
can I interject just to make a comment on one of the items in the consent calendar?
Yes, I was just going to ask if there was any discussion.
Oh,
So
sorry.
yes, go for it.
Sorry. Look at me not following Robert's rules. I just wanted to make a note that for the first time, I believe since I have been on the board, we have received a vote of a resolution of concurrence from our American Indian Parent Advisory Committee, which means that we are meeting the Minnesota state standards for American Indian education. And I just want to thank our American Indian Parent Advisory Committee for working alongside us to make sure that we as a district are meeting the needs of our students. And I feel like their guidance has opened my eyes and has made me a better parent and school board member. So, thank you.
Thank you, and we have a representative from APAC in the space with us tonight. We're really grateful for you being here and for representing in person, and we're grateful to the entire group, and really happy to read the report with the vote of concurrence. I have a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next, we'll move on to our treasurer's report with Treasurer Adams.
Thank you, Chair Westmoreland. Kind of a brief report this time because there were only 12 days, actually 11 days, I believe, that were in the last financial period. But I did notice numerous charges for copier and printer rental, numerous charges for substitute teachers. We seem to be using a lot of those this year. Numerous charges for boys basketball and boys hockey officials. And then finally, a charge for a DJ at Sweethearts Dance that was held on February 11th. So with that, I move that we approve total disbursements in the amount of $384,127.88 for the period of February 17, 2023 through March 1, 2023.
I have a motion to approve the treasurer's report. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the treasurer's report. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you, Treasurer Adams. We will move on to new business, and I will turn it over to Dr. Mary Peary-Reed as we welcome Assistant Superintendent Lightfoot and the team to the table to talk about our finalist selection for employee benefits.
Thank you, Chair Westmoreland. So Dr. Lightfoot's approaching the table. We also have Julie Kaczmarek, our benefit specialist, and everything extraordinaire in the area of health insurance. And then our Blue Cross guest. Sorry, sir, I don't know your name, but I'm sure your team will introduce
Tony
you.
Pavelka.
Tony, thank you for being here. So yes, recently we had a request for proposal to select a third-party administrator, and we would like this team to tell you all about a very strong finalist. And Dr. Lightfoot, should I turn it over to you?
Great. Thank you. We'll also have Director Chapanduka with us this evening as well. As you are aware, we did go out for RFP for our third-party administrator for our benefits program. As we had discussed with the board, we were hopeful that we would have strong proposals come forward, as we haven't had a change in third-party administrators in over 2 decades. So part of our look and our work was to bring our self-insurance committee together. We are very fortunate to have a very active group with our self-insurance committee. Representatives from all of our labor groups participate in that. We had a long, long set of finalist presentations, and we were very impressed from the quality. And as we did our debrief, it was very clear that we had really an outstanding proposal from Blue Cross Blue Shield, and our group did recommend that we move forward with that. So we did want to kind of highlight a couple items from that and give Blue Cross Blue Shield the opportunity to really be with us as we continue to work toward launching this partnership. And I do want to note all of the work that the committee members have done. I do also want to note the amazing work that Julie has done and will continue to do as we make this transition. This transition will work us toward our July 1 implementation, which means that we have a lot of work in a really short period of time. We will move forward with our open enrollment period coming up in really around May. So we have some good programs that you'll hear about, programs that we're looking forward to developing. And I think overall, we were really able to look at a focus on wellness, which I think you'll see, and we had spoken about from all the really driving components about the workplace culture that we are looking to establish and provide. And we know that our employee benefits really matter because as many people make decisions around where they're working, their health insurance, their experiences within the organization, their ability to look at additional opportunities to maintain their own care over time become essentially important for us to make sure that we are working toward that number one employer of choice. So with that, Julie, any other things that I missed?
No, you covered everything.
All right. Torero, anything else that I missed in our introduction?
I think we're good to go.
All right. Well, then with that, Tony has prepared a little bit of information for the board, and then after we walk through these slides, we'll certainly be open to additional questions that any board members might have.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for having me here tonight. As I said, I'm Tony Pavelka. I'm the senior sales executive from Blue Cross who worked with the insurance committee as well as the broker in order to get to the point we're at today. The points that I wanted to talk about were really two main pieces. Health equity, which I did a little research on the Hopkins Public Schools public website before our presentation last week and see that we are just really aligned in terms of what Blue Cross is doing around health equity, and a lot of the things I saw on the website, stuff that I've heard here tonight already in the board meeting, it's been really good and refreshing. The other piece is going to be, what are we doing to help keep costs more affordable for people? Probably not make them go backwards, but keep them from growing as quickly. So with regard to health equity, the slide you're seeing here just really shows that we're truly a state of disparity here in Minnesota. When you look at that difference in the left-hand column, the difference in mortality rates, screening rates, optimal diabetes care based on race in Minnesota and the Twin Cities, it's just absolutely evident and in our face all over. We also know that income and geography can play a critical role as well. Bukata Hayes, who's our VP of Racial and Health Equity, recently spoke at the state capitol, actually talking about universal meals for students. And in that conversation at the capitol, he referenced how important it is to recognize these very things we're seeing on the slide here and really get to work to combat these inequities. Because the fact is that 80 to 90% of healthcare is shaped by factors outside the doctor's office. So these things do matter, and they matter not only intrinsically, but also to the bottom line for the district and the employees as well. If we move over to the next slide, this is just a slide kind of showing what Blue Cross has been a leader in the community in addressing health equity issues. As part of our work to organize around this issue, we've created an infrastructure within our organization with health equity coaches, racial justice facilitators, and diversity training at all levels throughout the organization. Bukata and his team have worked with external partners in the community and among our clients to help guide similar conversations as well and share learnings that we've had, best practices, and resources. When we're operationalizing in this space, we're using that data that we acquire through all of the members that we touch and all the other places we're involved to develop strategies to really drive results around health equity. We've adopted and shared some formal policies around health equity, gender identity work, as well as making an effort throughout across our plan to be very cognizant of the language that we use. Some of the highlights that we've done in the community, we've done supporting work around narrative change for the next generation of participants in high schools with 360 Journalism and the Minneapolis Institute of Art. We're partnering with the University of Minnesota Mankato to provide scholarships to further the pipeline for health professionals that are culturally competent. Again, we've done that advocacy I mentioned previously for universal free meals in schools. One of the neat things we've done is create a flex fund that's dedicated to housing stabilization services for members who are enrolled on MSHIP in our roles. And then lastly, our Blue Cross Foundation has provided funding to 18 different grantees for early childhood and healthy start services. This is super important because research shows that the public actually gets a 16-to-1 return on investment for every dollar that's spent for early childhood services. In addition to that, our public website has landing pages that highlight this industry-leading work we're doing in gender services, as well as a bevy of other free resources for clients and really any employer that's interested to go out to our free public website to use those resources to guide their work around racial health equity and DEI. Moving on, the other piece that I wanted to talk about was just that question of, well, that's great, you're paying claims, that's wonderful, but what are you doing to reduce the total cost of care? Basically, the answer to that is everything we do is about reducing the total cost of care and looking at it from that holistic lens. So total cost of care really equates to affordability, which is a key topic for employers as well as employees trying to pay their medical expenses and their premiums out of their pocket. It's really about lowering claim costs, managing trend, and providing quality care. And there's 4 really key components to what we're doing. We start with our network, which we have the nation's largest and really best network in terms of leveraging discounts and benefit design, along with some high-performing networks, I know which is one of the pieces that the school district is looking at here. And then benefit design tailored to your population. As we get to know your population, we can make recommendations for specific benefits to really bring the right benefit to your employees and their families that are covered on the plan. The last piece around that is value-based contracting, which gets away from the old school model of just paying providers for doing more and more services and gets them to be able to be in a spot where they're actually being paid to deliver more high-value services, closing gaps in care, maintaining and increasing the overall health of the population that they serve. We've been working in that space of value-based care since 2010, and I'm happy to say that today, 75% of the claims that we pay in Minnesota are based on, or paid through contracts that have an enhanced value-based care component. So we're really starting to see even increased traction with our larger care systems and those that make up the high-value network or our Minnesota high-performing network. Clinical costs or clinical programs that we have also focus on member health, population health management, caring for the entire population, care management for specific individuals with high touch needs, as well as real condition specific programs for musculoskeletal concerns, diabetes, behavioral health, et cetera. And then cost protection on the backside is supported by analytics, insight-driven analytics in our system. Payment integrity, which basically means really like full body cavity search, scrubbing claims to make sure that they're being paid correctly and that our provider partners are billing things correctly so that your dollars are being spent as you intend them to be spent. And then fraud, waste, abuse prevention programs as well. The last piece of that is member engagement. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but that really supports advocacy for the members and efficient healthcare system navigation that improves outcomes, where people know where to go and know how to get there. It helps them get better results. So really with all of what we're doing here, we're focusing on reducing the total cost of care while focusing on the health of our members. On the next slide, I wanted to just highlight one of the pieces on the previous slide talked about integrated pharmacy and medical benefits. I know that many of the solutions that were reviewed, I'm assuming by the Assurance Committee, talked about what's called a carve-out PBM, where you have your medical claims payer and then you have another outside pharmacy benefit manager that pays the drug claims and negotiates those pieces. Blue Cross is all about, and our preference is, the solution that we brought for Hopkins is our integrated model where we as a nonprofit organization, work with Prime Therapeutics, who's our pharmacy benefit management partner. That's also another nonprofit organization, to really work together, because we do this all the time on all of our insured business. They're our partner. So we have a great channels open, communication open. We have one medical policy across both medical and pharmacy. And so we're sharing data. That's the natural course of business for us. So the slide here just kind of shows we're managing that total cost of care together with Prime as opposed to an outside entity that might have its own motives or shareholder profit motives, that sort of thing. We're using combined actionable data constantly. And then the other nice thing is it's a great member experience for your people that are covered. One ID card, one customer service, no transfers, no being told, oh, that's a pharmacy question, you got to call somebody else. We handle it all in-house. Because we're doing that, we did a study over the last few years of groups that have that integrated pharmacy versus the carve-out, and we see what you see on the right-hand side of the slide. The integrated model provides for a 17% lower probability of hospitalization, 13% lower probability for ER visits, and an overall lower spend of $422 per member per year. And a member in our world is, if I'm a family of 5 that's covered on the plan, that's 5 members based on having that integrated pharmacy model. So we're really excited to bring that to the school district. And then lastly, just something that's pretty new for us, we just brought it online here this year, we've been working on this, is our new navigation and engagement tool, Blue Care Advisor. And it's a web-based tool, but it also faces internally within our organization to help share data with every customer service rep a member might interact with, every care manager, and others throughout the organization as well. Blue Care Advisor is really that high-tech, high-touch system and has an integrated ecosystem. So if you've got point solutions that you're purchasing through Blue Cross and even some outside ones that we may be able to integrate, they'll go to one spot. Your members will go to one spot to see everything that's available to them, and the system also will point out to them based on their utilization, the way they interact with the system using AI and machine learning, as well as health assessments that they might take to point them in the right direction. So we see a lot higher member usage rates when members are accessing their benefits that way in a way that makes sense to them and is really personalized toward them. The well-being focus of Blue Care Advisor, it really integrates that personalization, including what we call next best actions or recommendations. So when I filled out my health assessment, I said I was interested in health coaching for weight management. I now see that as a recommendation for me until I take that action, and then it checks that off the list and it surfaces something else for me. So that really tends to drive engagement because people can see that this is working for them. We also bring that approach to our healthcare provider searches. There's ability to turn on prevention incentives and then condition-based campaigns through the system, the way based on claims data as well as how I interact, that can target members based on their health needs. The last piece of this is we're using all that data really to show value and return on investment for you as the purchaser. Provide transparency. There's a great, we showed it during the meeting, mission control data dashboard that shows what's going on with your population as they use this system. And ultimately, we're using that data that we get to guide our members with those recommended next best actions. So we're bringing value to the member by giving them better health and opportunities to participate in programs that you're paying for, and to you as the employer by over time using that data to decrease healthcare costs. And really, I think to bring that peace of mind where you know that the system is set up to bring members what they need at the time that they need it. And also, we can give you that data through mission control to customize communications to segments of the population with issues that are important to the school and to help you get to those folks as we see them in need.
And I would just add, the information that you see here was all presented to the insurance committee. I think some of the other things that were spoken to, Julie, you might as well, some of the other kind of components that we already have that could be integrated in.
So yeah, we're evaluating some other programs associated with Blue Cross, some that we currently have and some that may be new.
And be able to look at that full suite of options and hopefully tailor the experience more into one space on one platform that, as was mentioned, would be more user-focused as one of our desired outcomes. Part of the other desired outcome that we had was making sure that our RFP was a sound financial decision, and we were very pleased with the information that came forward, looking at the proposal from a cost perspective. Director Chapanduka, anything else that you would add on those terms?
Thank you, Dr. Lightfoot. Not really. I think the proposal actually came out as the lowest bid, which definitely we anticipate in terms of our
Director Chapanduka, it's hard for us to hear you. The volume is low, which might be an issue on our end, and then there's some feedback. And you're saying important things, so I want to make sure that we hear you and that our community hears you.
Sure. Can you guys hear me?
We still have the feedback issue, which will not become more pleasant as we turn up the volume. But that is one option we have, would be to turn up the volume on our end.
Okay, just give me a second.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Oh, you think that's where the feedback is coming from? I don't know. It's the only one not muted. I don't know if it's supposed to be. I think it has to be on so that people in the Google Meet can hear it.
Sorry about that. Can you guys hear me better now?
Oh,
Much.
perfect, thank you.
Okay. Well, what I was just gonna say is,
Unfortunately, the feedback is back.
well, I think as I'm speaking, I'm seeing like there must be the microphone around Dr. Lightfoot.
Oh. Is there another option, or we can go with this if this is the best we can do? We can also move on to some other questions and then come back to you for the financial piece.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Director Chapanduka. Thank you very much for the presentation. Really pleased to see you lead with health equity in terms of values alignment with our work here in Hopkins. It's very important, and it was interesting to hear about all the other work that Blue Cross Blue Shield is doing in terms of advocacy and narrative work and all of that. So appreciate that framing. Certainly sounds like a lot of great features for our employees, which is important. As somebody who has my personal insurance plan through my employer has that separate pharmacy component, and it is just really, really hard to navigate, especially when you have kids and partners involved. And so appreciate that integrated aspect. And then the dashboard, that seems like it's going to be very user-friendly for our employees. So that was all great information to hear. Wondering if my board colleagues have any comments or questions for Mr. Pavelka as we wait for Director Chapanduka here.
Chair Bouchard.
Yes.
I also was really excited to hear about the equity focus that Blue Cross Blue Shield is bringing, I think, to the beginning of the forefront of the conversation. But I just then had some specific questions about what that means in terms of coverage for our employees and our community. So is it something that translates into Blue Cross Blue Shield being very willing and able to cover mental health and also trauma-informed care? I know that that is something that is really important right now, especially to our staff, as we've been dealing with the ongoing ramifications of the pandemic and also different things that have happened across our communities.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that's very important. So it all falls under the category of behavioral health in terms of some of those issues. I mentioned a little bit about gender services. That's been something we've seen with a lot of our public sector clients, that's extremely important. I would really encourage you to go out to our bluecrossmn.com website at your leisure and just type in gender services. There's a whole piece of information there. We actually employ a gender services consultant, which is a role that I don't think exists in any other health plan in Minnesota and maybe not anywhere else, who steps folks through that. Other parts of the behavioral health piece, it's actually been very interesting for me to learn from a sales perspective and in doing presentations, to like the insurance committee presentation and this one as well, just how robust that is in terms of all the services and the folks that we have that back up those pieces. And any of the other care pieces that we're talking about, we are going to be really on the bleeding edge of bringing pieces into the health plan to provide coverage for them. There's like community advocacy pieces that we were the first plan in the state to allow for coverage for things like that. Again, a lot of this has been in response in recent years to some of these real things that I don't think any of us thought we'd find ourselves in this situations created by the pandemic. So yes, I think the answer there is we're gonna have an option to cover anything that is important to the district that's coverable under ERISA guidelines under a plan.
And I would just add briefly some of the great work that Julie has been doing with our health broker and our wellness consultant is gathering data from our employee population with our most recent wellness survey. Julie, just a couple of highlights of that you think might be relevant to some of this?
Sure. Just like you had mentioned, behavioral health services are the #1 factor that many of our survey participants listed. Peer connection was another one that they mentioned, but I don't have all the final results, I got high level today, but that is something that I worked with our Jill from Marsh. We've been already starting, working on different programs through Blue Cross that we can provide to our staff, and mental health is #1.
Great, thank you.
Staff and their dependents. I think that's also key to point out, that, we want to make sure that the dependents on our medical plan are also available to get these services as well.
Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Director Chapanduka, we will come back to you. Hi, it's nice to see you.
Well, good to see you. Thank you, Chair Westmoreland. Can you guys hear me better now?
You sound great, yes.
Okay, I apologize. I don't know. Maybe it's my background. I'm at home. The only thing I was going to add is actually Blue Cross Blue Shield came out as the lowest bidder out of the whole entire process. So we definitely are looking forward to a great partnership with them. And also the fact that we'll be actually using one platform. If we compare to our current structure, where we are sitting in different platforms in terms of health and wellness, Look was come with an integrated approach to health and wellness. That's an added advantage, and I hope it will increase participation across our system.
Thank you, Director Chapanduka. How many bidders did we have?
I was trying to think, Julie.
For our medical insurance, we probably had, I would say, 6, and then we had 3 pharmacy benefit companies put a bid in.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions and comments from my board colleagues?
I just had a curiosity question. I was just wondering if other third-party administrators or providers are also focused on health equity, or are you on sort of a leading edge with that?
I'm sure, just because in the general community where we're seeing RFPs or requests for proposals come in everywhere, it's becoming very common to be included everywhere. I will say, I do think that the competition is playing catch up a little bit with Blue Cross. We've been on the forefront of it. Like I said, Bukata Hayes, he's a VP of Racial and Health Equity. I don't know that that position exists at other third-party administrators or carriers in Minnesota. I think we're in a very competitive state, and the competition is wonderful, honestly. So I think they will move into that space, but I do feel Blue Cross is on the leading edge there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments?
The last comment I would make, and I tried to echo it in the presentation, but it takes a lot of people to go through this process. So I just want to put it out there that we had many members that gave up time to look at review proposals. Julie did excellent work throughout the whole process and continues to lead in that space. And I just feel grateful that we have the team that we have here in Hopkins working on this, because it's a self-insurance plan, which means that we're all invested and it's all to our benefit. And the more that we can do that together, the better results that we achieve. So grateful to have the team working on it that's working on it.
Thank you. Assistant Superintendent Lightfoot, could you help us understand the process moving forward? So this evening was a board information and discussion item, no action needed. When will our action be needed, and what will that look like?
Yep. That will look like us finalizing the terms of the conditions. That would be on a consent. So you will see a contract come forward with third-party administrator that will be on the consent agenda. So prior to that, we wanted to give you the background so that sometimes you just get a document and you may wonder, what was all this, or what is this? And we wanted to kind of bring this forward so that you could see all the work and energy and effort that goes into making this happen for all of our employees, and as Julie so well pointed out, the dependents that come with this as well.
Well, thank you. We appreciate that. And from a transparency and alignment perspective, it's important for our community to hear this information as well. So thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you all.
We will move to our next agenda item, which is policies and first read, and Assistant Superintendent Lightfoot is going to stay with us, and I will turn it over to Vice Chair Andreessen.
Thank you, Chair Westmoreland. As you can see, there are policies before us today to discuss that the Policy and Monitoring Committee has reviewed. And also, we enjoy our student board rep on that committee who helps us work through these policies, and that is much appreciated. I wanted to bring the full board into alignment with our racial equity impact analysis tool that we use when we are looking at all policies. I think most important for work at this level with the board are 3 questions that I want us all to keep in mind. What are the equity impacts of this decision? Who will benefit from and/or be burdened by this decision? And are there strategies to mitigate any unintended consequences of this decision? And with that, I will turn it over to Assistant Superintendent Lightfoot to walk us through each policy individually.
Thank you. The first that we have this evening is Policy 611, which is homeschooling. You will note that the Minnesota School Board Association model policy did make some specific changes. Those changes were related to statutory information that should be included. Those modifications have been made in Policy 611, along with some editorial items, editing items and grammar correction. Other than that, those were the specific changes that were there in Policy 611. Questions for me on 611?
Chair Westmoreland,
Yes.
I'm just curious, how many students do we have in the district that are homeschooled? How many people will this affect?
I would have to double check that, and we can get back to you on that.
Okay.
I wouldn't want to misspeak, and it isn't a number that is always in front of me, but we can work with our business office and our data collection for that, because as far as a process, the Administrative Services Office, our administrative assistant serves as the point of contact liaison. So we'll track that information, and we'll get a final count and then make sure that we have that for you.
Thank you.
Any other questions on 611? Okay, we can move on to 612.1.
Sure. 612.1 is the parental involvement policies for Title I programs. It is a statutory requirement that we have this. As you will note, the items for change were not at all needing any modification in 612.1, so you see it as is. There was also no modification that was recommended since 2016 from the Model School Board Association policy. Questions about 612.1?
Looks like we can move on to 615.
Okay. 615, as you will note from what we included, 615 had some significant revisions that were specifically designed to reflect Minnesota statutory change. Therefore, as we did this review, we looked at the Minnesota School Board Association policy and are recommending the adoption of 615. I should note that as we look at the adoption of 615, we are also doing work to make sure that the language is inclusive, and we are continuing with that. What we thought that our first set would be the substantial adoption of the terms that have changed according to statute. And then what we would look toward is we would look toward ways that we could look at utilizing inclusive language to note that we can reflect that in the policy itself. But we also wanted to make sure that we were mindful of the required changes, wanted to move forward with those first, and we'll have additional work that will be ongoing to reflect that language change.
So when you say there will be additional work, so should we expect to see this policy come back before us, or kind of what does that look like process-wise?
Sure. We do it a couple ways. When we have, for example, terms that are substantial, our policy on policies states that those are the terms, I know, isn't it? Those are the terms that we bring in front of the board. If we have work where we are making grammar edits, if there are editing items that are there that don't change the substantial meaning, but add value or clarification, that those can be done in that update and don't require board approval. We can run those through the monitoring committee, bring those to the monitoring committee for feedback on that language, make that language change, and that language change doesn't need to run through the board committee with the full board. Does that help?
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Chair Westmoreland.
Yes.
Just a note, there's a reference in this policy to something that I had not heard of before, which was the Minnesota Test of Academic Skills. And when I did some research on that today, found out that that is going away, and it's going to be replaced by MCAs. So that will require a future change. It's going to be over a period of several years, but that's one of the things that will probably be before the next, a board 2 years, 3 years down the road.
So we'll look toward that. I should also clarify one of the clarification points that the monitoring committee did ask for, and I confirmed with Director Ertl, was the note that EL students new to the United States are required to take all assessments. We did double check that, and that is a statutory requirement. So we have done the diligence so far with this policy, but as noted, when legislative sessions end, there are often many changes that we have to go back and take a look toward, especially as it refers to specific policy information.
Thank you. Any additional questions or comments for Assistant Superintendent Lightfoot? So with that, I would look for a motion that the board approve the above policies in first read and that the board direct the administration to prepare the policies for approval in second reading at the next meeting as part of consent.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the policies. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next, we will move on to our resolution calling for executive session. This executive session will be for our superintendent's mid-year review and our Hopkins Education Association negotiations. We are permitted by Minnesota open meeting law to call executive session for these two activities. And in order to do so, we need to approve the resolution that is printed under this agenda item in the packet. And that requires a roll call vote. And so Clerk Ross will be called into service here. So I would look for a motion that the board approve the resolution calling for executive session as printed in the packet.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the resolution calling for executive session. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll move to Clerk Ross for the roll call vote.
Okay. Chair Westmoreland.
Aye.
Director Hartland.
Aye.
Director Peterson.
Peterson. Aye.
Director Khan.
Aye.
Director Anderson.
Aye.
Treasurer Adams.
Aye.
Director Ross.
We have 7 ayes, 0 nays. The motion to call an executive session immediately after this meeting carries. Next, we'll move on to our board member reports.
Chair Westmoreland.
Yes, Director Adams.
A rather brief one. After how many days after the last board meeting was the Hopkins Education Foundation Bash, which I attended and have attended every year that it's existed. So I'm proud of that. I had to crash for the first one, but I've been to all.
How did this one rank?
It was in the top 10. Yeah. So, and then and had a great time, and it was just, it's always heartening to see how much support that we get from our community and from HEF, and very thankful that we have that organization to do our R&D for us, our research and development. So they do a great job. Then on March 3rd, last Friday, I attended AMSD in Little Canada. Listened to a couple of our legislators, Steve Swodzinski, senator, and Representative Lori Pryor addressed the assembled there and online. Talk about their, I wouldn't say what their priorities are for the current session, but their assessment of what might pass in this current session. And they were customarily vague about what might happen. So a lot of negotiation going on right now at the Capitol. So much of that is being done behind closed doors, unfortunately. And then we had the LAC meeting on Friday. And tomorrow, LAC is going over to the Capitol. And we'll have our LAC day at the Capitol starting at 8 o'clock. So we got to be there early. So that's my report.
Thank you, Director Adams.
Chair Westmoreland?
Yes.
I had a couple reports.
Great.
On February 14th, there was a skip meeting, and it was really nice because a lot of members from our community had joined us, including our Hopkins Police Department and some other groups. And it was great to see that they want to transform skip a bit in order to improve communication between community and family and our schools. And so they really want to exchange ideas between our various partners. And I did bring up mental health and how we really need to focus on making sure that our families and our students are doing well.
Thank you.
And another thing that I went to was our Mentors of Color group. And it was really nice that I found out that Alice Smith in particular is reading a book together called Me and White Supremacy, to combat racism, change the world, and become a good ancestor. The book is by Layla F. Saad, I think that's her last name. And it's wonderful that I was told that so many of our Alice Smith staff are participating in reading this book together and discussing it and having these great honest conversations about, racism and how they can improve themselves and communicating with everyone. So yeah, those are my two things.
Thank you.
Chair Westmoreland?
Yes.
I just quickly wanted to mention that I was invited to be part of the PYP training that happened last week with Eisenhower and Gatewood as Gatewood as Eisenhower continues its transition and Gatewood starts its transition into that program school-wide. It was really illuminating. One of the things that I really appreciated about that training was the breadth of staff that were invited to be a part of it, all the way to office staff, to educators in the classroom. I felt like that was a new practice, but a necessary one, that everyone is being trained in the things that are directly impacting our students.
Excellent, thank you. Any other board member reports?
I do have a brief report.
Great.
In addition to the LAC activities that I participated in and will participate in tomorrow, I did get the chance to attend the State of Our District address, which was very informative and related to a more personal thing that I've done on as a board member and community member recently. In our kind of cool little neighborhood enclave we've had a lot of family turnover. We've had a lot of new families move in to our district, and within 5 houses of me, there's not 1 and not 2, but there are 7 little girls that are either between newborn and age 3. And so I've had an opportunity, like those neighbors have become friends, and I have had the opportunity to really personally speak to the good things that Hopkins does and all the reasons that they should be excited about being part of this community, and they are excited to get their copy of the state of the district. And then additionally, I participate in a committee in Meadowbrook to their staff appreciation committee, and so we've done a variety of events to recognize kind of the Valentine's holiday, and then recently they had conferences there, which are a big lift for the teachers, and so then we provide meals for them during those days.
Excellent, thank you. So I have a brief report tonight. Next time will be longer. I'm working on a couple of things in collaboration with our City of Hopkins and Hennepin County partners. Commissioner Latondras and I have been keeping each other very busy. So I'll have more reports on that next time. I wanted to make sure my board colleagues and our community knew that I was recently appointed to the Local Progress National School Board Steering Committee. So Local Progress is an organization dedicated to bringing together local elected officials to keep our communities moving forward, share best practices, engage in professional development. The organization does model policy work, issues briefs. They offer communications assistance to local electeds, advocacy resources. There are a lot of great case studies for progress on their website, trainings, that type of thing. And the organization nationally is looking to really expand its school board program. So 12 of us from across the country were selected to lead that work. And my goal is to get a Hopkins case study as part of the Local Progress kind of collection of materials, because as I talk with colleagues across the country, we know that there are some really wonderful things that we're doing here in Hopkins, and I think that it's important to share that on a national stage. So we had our first meeting last week. It was really energizing to connect with school board members from across the country who are engaging in similar work to the work that we're doing here in Hopkins. So looking forward to continuing to be part of that group, and really grateful for the opportunity. I want to make sure our community knows that Resource West is hosting a fundraiser next Tuesday on March 14th from 4 to 7 at Hopkins Center for the Arts. It's called Gathering to Grow. It's a community celebration. There is going to be an art component, music, other performances, other community organizations that will be tabling at the event, so some resource sharing, and a great time to get together to celebrate Resource West. Of course, donate money, as Director Adams reminded us last time. Donate money to Resource West as well, and be in community. So I hope that you can join us. Okay, so we have no incidental reports this evening, so we will move on to adjournment. And I would look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adjourn. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. This meeting of the Hopkins School Board is adjourned at 8:17 p.m.